I was one of 12 men summoned to that house after dark. She kept a ledger, written in her own hand. Our names, dates, notes on how we could be managed, how we could be erased. I saw it one study. Locked drawer, she thought was safe. Entry number 8 was mine. Compliant and discreet. It said, reassignment if necessary. Benjamin was entry number 5. He disappeared 3 days after the ledger noted disposal required. Isaac was entry number 12. He tried to take that ledger to someone who mattered. They sold him to Alabama cotton fields within 24 hours. The woman who wrote those entries still pours tea for her neighbors, still attends church every Sunday, still sleeps in that house where 12 men learned that being chosen meant being erased. That ledger still exists. Her handwriting still marks us like livestock she once owned. I speak now because 11 others cannot. The question is not whether you believe me. The question is, how many ledgers like that one are still locked in studies across this country, and how many names are written inside them? I was summoned after dark on a Tuesday in April. The path to the main house had been walked so many times that year the grass no longer grew where my feet fell. The earth there was packed hard and smooth like river stone. She sent word through the cook who would not meet my eyes when she delivered it. Mistress, wants you at the house? The cookie said, 8 o'clock. I nodded. The cook turned away before I could ask why. I had 2 hours. I washed at the pump behind the quarters. The water was cold enough to make my hands ache. I scrubbed my face and neck and arms with lye soap that stung the cuts on my knuckles. I put on the cleanest shirt I owned. It was not clean. The other men in the quarters did not ask where I was going. They had learned not to ask questions about summons that came after dark. I left at 7:45. The sky was purple-black, the kind of darkness that comes before the moon rises. I could smell the tobacco fields, the green-sweet smell that gets into everything. I could hear the hounds in the kennel a quarter-mile off. I could hear my own footsteps on the path. The hallway smelled of beeswax and lamp oil when I arrived. My reflection moved across the polished floors like something that did not belong there. The floorboards were pine, white planks that had been sanded pale. Each one cost more than a year of my life. I knew this because I had heard the master brag about them to a visitor from Charleston. She was waiting in the small parlor, the one that faced the garden. She stood near the window with her back to the door. Her dress was dark green silk. Her hair was pinned up in a way that showed her neck. She closed the door herself. That was the first warning. Doors closed by the mistress were different than doors closed by servants. They closed with intention, with finality. You will come when I send for you, she said. Her voice was low, controlled. You will tell no one. I kept my eyes on the floorboards. The grain ran east to west. I counted knots to keep my face empty. 7 knots in the board nearest my feet. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am. She moved closer. The silk of her dress made a sound like water running over stones. I had heard that sound before, in a different house, with a different woman who also required secrecy. That woman had been younger, kinder in her manner, but the requirements had been the same. The ending had been the same too. This is for your protection, she said. There are those who would not understand, who would make trouble. I nodded. Protection always sounded like that, like something done to you that you should be grateful for. She touched my shoulder. Her hand was small and cool through the fabric of my shirt. I did not move. I had learned long ago that stillness was safer than response. You may go, she said after a moment. I will send for you again. I left through the back entrance, the one the servants used. The night air was thick with the smell of tobacco fields and chimney smoke. I walked the long way back to the quarters, circling past the smokehouse and the equipment barn, so no one would see which direction I came from. The arrangement was never named. It existed in the space between what was said and what was required. I learned the schedule by repetition, the way you learn the rhythm of field work or the pattern of seasons. Tuesday and Friday after the master went to town on business. He left after breakfast and returned before supper the next day. Thursday, if there were guests staying and she needed to appear occupied elsewhere, to have a reason to be away from the sitting room or the dining hall. The pattern held for 3 weeks. before I understood it fully, before I understood that understanding it changed nothing. The work got lighter without explanation. I was moved from the fields to the garden in the second week of May, then to the stable, then two tasks that kept me near the house at odd hours when my presence would seem ordinary. I mucked stalls that did not need mucking. I trimmed hedges that were already trim. I carried firewood in weather too warm for fires. I became part of the landscape, visible but unremarkable. The overseer did not question it. The master did not notice it. The other servants noticed, but said nothing where I could hear. I accepted nothing where others could see. When she sent extra food, wrapped in cloth, I ate it before dawn in the equipment shed, sitting on the floor between the plows and harrows. When she offered a better shirt, handed to me folded in brown paper, I wore it under my old one until the old one fell apart on its own. I buried the scraps in the garden deep enough that they would not be found. The quarters noticed anyway. Silence has a shape. People learn to see around it. A woman named Celia, who washed linen, stopped speaking to me in May. She had been friendly before, had shared her cornbread sometimes when the rations ran short. Now, she turned away when I approached the washing line. A man named Jacob, who worked the forge, began watching me with narrowed eyes when I passed. He said nothing, but his face said everything. He's fussy, say what you are. I stopped, lingering in common spaces. I took my meals early or late, never when others gathered. I spoke only when necessary. I made myself small. I had been chosen before, in my 14th year, in a house in Virginia, by a woman who said I reminded her of someone kind, someone she had lost. Her brother, she said, who had died of fever when he was young. That choosing ended when her husband returned early from a trip and found me in the parlor, holding a book she had given me. A book of poetry that I could not read but had been pretending to please her. I was sold south within the week. The woman cried at my departure. She pressed a handkerchief into my hand at the auction block, embroidered with my initials that were not really mine. I did not cry. I left the handkerchief on the wagon seat. So I knew what secrecy protected. I knew whose safety mattered when safety was named. I began to notice patterns in June. The heat had settled in, the kind that makes the air shimmer above the fields. Tuesdays she sent for me early, before the last light faded. I would arrive at 8 and leave by 9, walking back through darkness that felt heavier than before. But some Tuesdays I would arrive to find her distracted, her hair already disturbed, her manner sharp where it had been soft. She would send me away with invented tasks. Fetch water from the well that did not need fetching. Check the lock on the garden gate that did not need checking. Return the book I had not brought. I learned to read the signs. The tightness around her mouth. The way she would not meet my eyes. The sharpness in her voice when she gave instructions. On those nights, I made myself useful in the kitchen until she called or did not call. I peeled potatoes. I scrubbed pots. I did work that was not mine to do, and the cook let me because she understood things she did not speak aloud. Then I saw them. The other paths. It was late June, near dusk. I was walking to the house for a Friday summons. I took my usual route past the vegetable garden and the well. But as I approached, I saw the grass, and I saw what I had not noticed before. Grass worn thin in different directions. Not just my path from the east, but another from the south, another from the west. Faint but visible, coming from the direction of the cooperage. Tracks that converged at the house from different quarters. I had thought the path was mine alone. I had been wrong. I adjusted my routes. After that, I took the long way past the smokehouse, adding 10 minutes to my walk. I timed my arrivals to miss the departures I had started to sense. Once in early July, I saw a man leaving through the garden gate while I approached from the east. He did not see me. I had stopped behind the corner of the dairy house, hidden by shadows. His shirt was buttoned wrong, the buttons misaligned so the hem hung crooked. He walked quickly. He's had dome. I recognized him from the south quarter. Daniel, young, maybe 19. He had arrived in the spring, sold from a property in North Carolina. The whispers began without names attached in mid-July. To women at the well, their voices low, going silent when I approached. A conversation that died mid-sentence when I entered the kitchen to fetch water. A man who looked at me differently in the yard, not with judgment but with recognition, the kind that said, "You too," the kind that said, "I know." I kept my presence ordinary. I carried firewood at the usual times even in summer heat. I spoke when spoken to. I answered questions with the smallest possible truth. "Yes, ma'am." "No, sir." "Right away." I became unremarkable in every way except the one that mattered. She grew watchful in late July. The heat was brutal that year, the kind that killed the old and the weak. The tobacco drooped in the fields despite watering. The air tasted like dust. She asked questions that were not questions. "You were delayed Thursday." Not an accusation. A measurement. A test. "Yes." "Ma'am." The mare was colicking. Needed walking for 2 hours. She watched my face. I had learned long ago how to make my face empty. How to let questions pass through without leaving marks. And Friday, the pump needed fixing. "Ma'am." Leather washer was split. She turned away. I saw her shoulders tighten beneath the silk. I saw her hands clasped together, the knuckles white. "You may go," she said. I kept my timing exact after that. If she sent for me at 8, I arrived at 8. Not 7:50 to seem eager. Not 8:10 to seem resistant. Exactly 8. I began leaving the quarters earlier. Arriving early, but waiting in the shadows near the smokehouse until the church bell in town struck the hour. But the evidence accumulated anyway. One morning in August I was summoned to the parlor to move a trunk. It was early, just after dawn. She was not there yet. The room smelled of perfume and candle wax. On the small table near the window I saw a handkerchief. It was not mine, but it was familiar. I had seen it in the south quarter, tucked into a man's pocket 2 weeks before. A gift that someone had been careless about hiding. The handkerchief was embroidered with small blue flowers. The kind of work that took hours. The kind of gift that meant something. I moved the trunk and left quickly. I moved through the house like smoke after that. Present but undefined. I kept my eyes down. I touched nothing I did not need to touch. I remembered nothing I was not supposed to see. The servants began to whisper with more boldness in late August. I heard fragments when I passed. Again last night. The young one from the cooperage. Thinks we don't see. I stopped eating in the common area entirely. I took my meals in the equipment shed, sitting among the tools, eating quickly in silence. The confrontation happened on a Wednesday in late August, which was not my day. I was in the stable brushing down the carriage horses when I heard her voice, high and sharp, cutting through the afternoon heat like a blade. She was in the kitchen. I could hear her through the wall that separated the stable from the summer kitchen. "It was here yesterday, on this very table." The cook's voice, quieter. "I have seen nothing, mistress. Someone has taken it. A brooch, garnet and silver. It was my mother's. Perhaps it fell, mistress. Perhaps nothing." There was silence, then footsteps, then another voice. Male, younger than mine. I recognized it. Daniel from the south quarter. "I seen nothing, ma'am. I swear it." "You were in this house yesterday?" "Yes." "Ma'am, you sent for me. For the shutters that needed fixing. And you saw nothing." "No, ma'am, nothing." His voice shook. He was lying badly, or he was telling the truth badly. With fear they sound the same. I stayed in the stable until dark. I brushed the same horse 3 times, working the curry comb in slow circles. When she sent for me that night, later than usual, her hands shook when she poured the wine she sometimes offered, the wine I never drank. "There are rumors," she said. I waited. I had learned that silence was often the safest response. Vicious rumors, lies spread by the jealous and small-minded. I understood that I was supposed to deny them, to reassure her, to make her feel that her secret was still hers alone, that I had heard nothing, suspected nothing. "I hear nothing, ma'am," I said. It was true. I heard whispers but no names, fragments but no complete stories. The truth assembled itself in pieces, and I pretended not to see the pattern. She studied my face for a long time. The lamplight made shadows under her eyes. She looked older than she had in April. tired in a way that Powder could not hide. "You may go," she said finally. I was not called for again on Tuesday or Friday. The following week I resumed full field work without explanation. My back remembered what my hands had forgotten. The tobacco rose stretched longer than I recalled. The sun was hotter. My body had softened in 3 months of lighter work. But the man from the South Quarter was not so easily forgotten. Daniel. I watched what happened to him with the sick certainty of recognition. I saw him called to the house in daylight once. A summons so careless it made other servants stop their work and stare. He walked across the yard, in full view, in the middle of the afternoon, disappearing into the house through the front entrance. He emerged an hour later with his shirt half buttoned and his eyes on the ground. I saw him reassigned to the most distant fields the same week. Fields that bordered the swamp where the mosquitoes bred thick and the water smelled of rot. Then I started noticing the others. A man named Samuel from the cooperage received new boots in September. Good leather, barely worn, the kind that appeared without explanation. He wore them proudly for 2 weeks. Then he was reassigned from cooperage work to field labor, and the boots became a burden, to fine for the mud and to stiff for the rows. Another man, Benjamin, was moved from heavy field work to lighter tasks around the property in late September. He tended the kitchen garden. He fed the chickens. He carried water for the washing. The women whispered about it. The men watched him with hard eyes. A younger man whose name I never learned appeared at the house 3 times in 1 week in October. I saw him waiting near the back entrance at dusk. I saw him leaving through the garden. I saw him reassigned to timber cutting the following Monday. The boots I had noticed earlier belonged to Marcus from the lumber crew. He had received them in August. By October he was back in the fields. His hands blistered and bleeding from work they were no longer accustomed to. I began to count. Daniel, Samuel, Benjamin, the unnamed younger man, Marcus. 5 that I could confirm. The paths in the grass suggested more. The household tightened in September. New rules appeared, posted in the kitchen where everyone would see them, written in the overseer's careful hand. No one was to be near the main house after dark without written permission that only she could give, signed and dated, stating the specific purpose and the expected duration. We all understood what that meant. Anyone near the house after dark was either summoned or trespassing, either chosen or criminal. There was no middle ground. I watched her walk past me in the yard one morning in late September. I was carrying water to the horses. She was walking to the garden with the neighbor woman who had come for tea. Her eyes moved over me like I was furniture, like I had never been anything else. Like Tuesday nights in April and May and June had never existed. I did not expect anything different, but the ease of it still caught in my throat. She found out plainly on a Saturday in early October. I was not there, but I heard about it from Celia, who had started speaking to me again, perhaps because my fall from favor made me safe to know. To men arriving at the same door within minutes of each other, both summoned, both spect. Daniel had a note, written in her hand, telling him to come to the house at 7 to repair a broken window latch. Samuel had been told verbally through the cook to arrive at 7 to move furniture in the parlor. They arrived within 5 minutes of each other. They met at the back entrance. They understood in that moment what neither had understood before. The kind of collision that makes secrecy impossible. Daniel was sold the following week. The buyer was from Mississippi, a man with a reputation for working people to death in the cotton fields. I watched Daniel loaded into the wagon with 3 others, his possessions tied in a cloth that could fit in one hand. He did not look at the house when the wagon pulled away. Samuel was whipped for a theft that no one witnessed. 20 lashes in the yard on a Wednesday morning while the household watched. The overseer did the whipping. The master stood on the porch and watched. The mistress watched from an upstairs window, a pale shape behind glass. The missing item was never named, never recovered. Samuel took the lashes without crying out. Afterward, he could not straighten his back for a week. Benjamin simply disappeared from the property without record. One day in late October he was there, feeding the chickens at dawn. The next day his bunk was empty and someone else slept in it. No one asked where he went. No one answered when I asked quietly. Marcus kept his boots, but lost his position at the lumber crew. He returned to the fields with hands too soft for the work they now required. I watched his palms blister and split. I watched him wrap them in rags that soaked through with blood. The unnamed younger man was sold in November. I learned this from a bill of sale I saw on the overseer's desk when I was called to move a cabinet. The name meant nothing to me, but the age was right. 19. The description matched. I was assigned to the farthest tobacco field in late October, the one that bordered the swamp. The work was hard enough that exhaustion replaced thought. We worked from can't see to can't see, the old phrase that meant dawn to dusk. My hands blistered and bled and hardened. I learned to move without thinking, to exist without remembering. The house reset itself through October and into November. The mistress resumed her usual routines with a precision that felt deliberate. She attended church every Sunday in a blue dress with white lace at the collar. She poured tea for the neighboring women on Wednesday afternoons in the front parlor. She smiled at her husband across the dinner table and asked about his business in town, about the tobacco prices, about the weather predictions for next season. The story became, nothing happened. There were no favors, no secret arrangements, no men summoned in darkness. There were only rumors spread by the lazy and ungrateful, lies told by those who sought to damage a good woman's reputation. The narrative was simple and complete. It required no evidence because evidence had been erased. I kept my memory intact, every detail, every contradiction, the worn paths in 3 directions, the handkerchief with blue flowers, the misaligned buttons on Daniel's shirt, the way Samuel's hands shook after the whipping, the empty bunk where Benjamin had slept. The silence was not agreement. It was survival. Others vanished more quietly through the winter. Reassignments that looked ordinary, sales that were explained as economic necessity. The household thinned until only those who knew how to forget remained, or those who had never known at all. The new people who arrived did not ask about the ones who left. That was not how things worked. Spring came in late March. The dogwoods bloomed white against the green. The mistress bought new dresses from a traveling merchant who set up in the town square for 3 days. The master expanded the tobacco planting, cleared 3 more acres near the eastern boundary, bought to more field hands at auction. Everything was normal. I learned the full count to late, in pieces, through fragments of conversation and careful observation. 7 men over 2 years. Some overlapping, serving the same purpose in the same weeks. Some sequential, one replacing the next when the first became inconvenient or visible or expensive in ways that mattered. All sworn to secrecy, all believing they were singular, all learning otherwise. I carried those names without speaking them. Daniel, Samuel, Benjamin, Marcus. A man named Joseph who I learned about from a letter I saw being written in the overseer's office. A letter of sale. Another named Peter, who was reassigned in January to work that kept him far from the main property. A 7th, whose name I never confirmed, but whose face I remembered from the quarters. A man who left in winter for reasons unexplained. 7 names. 7 paths worn through grass that would not grow back. There was no safe place to put that knowledge except memory. The cost surfaced slowly through the spring. Daniel was gone, working himself to death in Mississippi cotton if he had survived the journey. Samuel stopped speaking after the whipping. His mouth still formed words, but no sound came. The doctor was not called. Benjamin was simply erased, his name removed from the property ledger, as if he had never existed. Marcus developed a shake in his hands that never steadied, a tremor that made simple tasks difficult. Joseph, I heard through whispers, was sold in February to a property in Georgia. Peter was reassigned to timber work in the farthest section of the property, work that kept him away for weeks at a time. I endured by making myself invisible. I worked the farthest field. I ate alone in the equipment shed. I slept without dreaming because I had learned how to empty my mind before sleep came, how to let the day drain away into darkness. The record closed itself with the efficiency of long practice. No ledger would show what happened. No letter would name it. No account book would track the favors given and violently withdrawn. The story existed only in the bodies of men who learned that chosen meant exposed, and exposure meant erasure. I speak now because the secrecy did exactly what it was designed to do. It protected her reputation. It punished us for existing in her desire. It made witnesses into accomplices by making truth unspeakable. I was summoned on a Tuesday in April in my 23rd year. I walked a path worn smooth by my own feet and the feet of others whose names I would learn too late. I entered a room that smelled of beeswax and lamp oil and wine I would not drink. I closed a door that was meant to keep others out but kept me in. I learned that night what I had already known but had not yet named clearly enough to protect myself. I was not the first. I would not be the last. The woman who required my secrecy required it from others too. And when secrecy failed, when paths crossed or gifts were noticed or timing overlapped, she would erase every man who knew her truth. I stand here now with 7 names burned into memory. The worn paths still run through grass that will not grow back. The discovery happened in November, 14 months after the first summons. I was not meant to see it. I had been sent to the main house to repair a shutter that hung loose on the 2nd floor. The wind had torn it partially free during a storm the night before. I carried my tools up the back stairs, the ones the servants used, narrow and steep. The mistress was in town with the neighbor women. The master was in the fields with the overseer. The house was empty except for the cook and the laundry woman who worked in the basement. I fixed the shutter in 20 minutes. But as I walked past the small study, the door stood open. I had never seen inside that room. It was kept locked. It was her private space. I should have walked past. I knew this, but something made me stop. On the desk lay a ledger, open. Not the household accounts. Something else. I stepped inside. My hands were shaking. I set down my tools without sound. The ledger contained names, dates, notes written in her careful hand. April 9th, initial contact. Compliant and discreet. April 23rd, reassigned to garden work. No questions asked. May 15th, observed speaking with D in quarters. Monitor. I turned the page. More names. More dates. More notes. Daniel's name. Samuel's name. Benjamin's name. All the others. Each entry tracked like livestock. Acquisition dates. Behavioral notes. Disposal methods. October 12th. D. NS discovered simultaneous arrival. Emergency sale and correction implemented. October 19th. S. Received corrective discipline. 20 lashes. Witnesses. Full household. Lesson reinforced. October 24th. B. Sold to trader. No documentation retained. I read faster. My heart hammered against my ribs. There were more names than I had counted. Not 7, 11. For men I had never known about. 1 from before I arrived. 3 who had overlapped with me but whose paths I had not seen. Each one tracked. Each one managed. Each one erased when convenient. I found my own name near the end. April 7th. Selected for discretion and prior experience. Age and temperament suitable. July 20th. Increasing awareness of pattern. Showing signs of observation. Risk assessment. Moderate. September 30th. Reassigned to distant fields. Termination not required at this time. Monitor for testimony risk. Testimony risk. I understood then that I was not safe because I had been forgotten. I was safe only as long as I remained silent. The cook's footsteps sounded on the stairs below. I closed the ledger. I picked up my tools. I left the study and descended the back stairs with my head down and my breathing controlled. That night I could not sleep. I lay on my bunk and stared at the ceiling and thought about 11 names. I thought about the word termination. I thought about Benjamin who had simply disappeared. I had believed the violence was reactive. Punishments, delivered in anger when secrecy failed. But the ledger proved otherwise. The violence was systematic, planned, documented. We were not men to her. We were problems to be managed. I began to watch differently after that. Not just the mistress, but the whole structure around her. The overseer, who implemented her reassignments without question. The master who never asked why young men vanished from his property. The neighbor women who smiled at her over tea and never wondered why her household had such high turnover. The system protected her because the system was built to protect women like her. In December, a new man arrived, bought at auction, young, maybe 18, tall, and quiet with hands that showed he had done field work all his life. His name was Isaac. I watched him for 2 weeks. I watched the mistress watch him. I saw the pattern beginning again. I had a choice then, the kind of choice that is not really a choice because both paths lead to harm. I could warn him, tell him what I knew, show him the worn paths, and explain what they meant. Or I could stay silent, protect myself, let the pattern continue. I chose silence for 3 more weeks. I told myself it was not my place. I told myself he would not believe me. I told myself that speaking would only get us both killed. But I remembered the ledger. I remembered the word termination. I remembered Benjamin's empty bunk. On a Thursday in late December, the first found Isaac alone near the well at dusk. The others had gone to supper. The yard was empty. "You been summoned yet?" I asked. He looked at me, wary. "What?" "To the main house. After dark. Has she sent for you?" His face changed, became careful and closed. "I don't know what you mean." "You will?" I said. "Soon. Maybe next week. Maybe tomorrow." He said nothing. "When she does," I said, "you need to know you ain't the first. You ain't special. You ain't chosen because she favors you. I should go," he said. "Listen to me." I stepped closer, kept my voice low. "There've been 11 others, maybe more, before I got here. She uses men and then she erases them. Sales, whippings, disappearances. She keeps a record. She plans it." His eyes widened slightly. "You lying? I seen the ledger. Upstairs study. Your name probably already in it. Potential candidate or some such. She watching you, deciding if you suitable." "Why you telling me this?" I had asked myself the same question. I still did not have a good answer. "Because I didn't know," I said. "And it cost me. Cost others worse." He backed away from me. "You trying to get me killed? Talking like this? I'm trying to keep you alive." He walked away quickly. Did not look back. I thought that would be the end of it. That he would ignore the warning or report me, or simply pretend the conversation never happened. But 3 days later I saw him watching the house at dusk, watching the paths, counting who came and went. He saw what I had seen. The pattern was too obvious once you looked for it. Isaac was not summoned in December or January. The mistress left for 2 weeks to visit her sister in Charleston. When she returned, the weather was bitter cold, and no one was summoned for anything except the most essential work. But in February the summons came. Isaac told me about it afterward. He found me in the equipment shed where I took my meals. "She sent for me," he said, "last night. I waited. I went. I couldn't refuse. You know that. I knew that. She gave me the same speech you said she would. Secrecy, protection, said it was for my own good. Did you?" I did what was required. His voice was flat. "Empty? What choice did I have?" "No choice." That was the point. But I've been thinking about what you said, about the ledger, about the others. I looked at him carefully. "What you thinking?" "I'm thinking someone needs to see that ledger. Someone who can do something about it. Ain't nobody can do nothing about it." I said, "She protected. We ain't. The mistress ain't the only person in this world." I understood then what he was suggesting. You want to take it, the ledger. I want to show it. To somebody, anybody. They'll hang you for theft before they read a single page. Maybe, he said, but maybe not. Maybe if the right person sees it. Maybe if enough people know. I thought about this for a long time. About the risk. About the almost certain failure. When I asked, next time she goes to Charleston, next time the house is near empty, that's 2 months away at least. Maybe more. Then we wait 2 months. We waited through February and March. Isaac was summoned for more times. Each time he went with the knowledge of what it meant. Each time he came back a little more hollowed out. I watched the household. watched for any sign that the mistress suspected, but she seemed confident in her system. Why wouldn't she be? It had worked for years. In late March, the mistress announced she would visit her sister again in April. She would be gone for 3 weeks. The master would accompany her for the first week, then return to oversee spring planting. That's when we do it, Isaac said. Second week, she gone. Master be back, but he don't go in that study. Don't even have a key to it. She have it locked. I know where the keys kept. Seen the housekeeper hang them in the kitchen. I should have refused. Should have told him it was suicide. But I was tired of carrying 11 names in silence. Tired of watching the pattern continue. What you need me to do? I asked. Keep watch, he said. And if something happens to me, you tell what you know. You testify. I agreed. The mistress left on a Monday in mid-April. The master left with her in the carriage, his traveling trunk strapped to the back. They would be gone for a week together. Then she would continue alone to Charleston. We waited until Wednesday. The household had settled into the routine of the mistress's absence. The cook prepared simpler meals. The housekeeper relaxed the cleaning schedule. The overseer focused on the fields. Isaac took the keys just after dawn when the kitchen was empty. We entered the house through the back entrance. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, watching the hallway. Isaac went up alone. He was gone for 20 minutes. Long enough that I started to sweat despite the cool morning air. When he came down, he carried the ledger wrapped in a cloth. His hands were steady, but his face was gray. It's worse than you said, he told me later. She got notes on all of us things we sighed. We did shibig livestock, deciding who to keep and who to cull. We hid the ledger in the equipment shed, wrapped in oilcloth and buried under a loose floorboard beneath the workbench. Now what? I asked. Now we wait for the right moment, Isaac said. When the master returns, when we can get it to someone who matters. But we did not get the chance to choose our moment. The master returned early, 2 days early. He arrived on Friday afternoon with a magistrate from town. Someone had sent word. Someone had told him that his property was being stolen. The housekeeper had noticed the keys out of place, had checked the study, had seen the ledger missing. They found Isaac in the south quarter that evening. They searched every building, every bunk, every corner. They found the ledger in the equipment shed an hour before dark. I watched from the field, watched them drag Isaac out, watched the overseer strike him across the face, watched him fall and rise and fall again. They did not hang him. That would have required explanation. Questions from the magistrate about what was in the ledger, and why a slave would risk death to steal it. Instead, the master declared that Isaac had stolen a valuable record book to sell to abolitionists, that he was part of a conspiracy, that he would be sold immediately to a cotton broker from Alabama who worked men to death within 2 years. The magistrate accepted this story. He did not ask to see the ledger. He did not question why a field hand would steal accounting records. Isaac was put in chains that night. I saw him in the yard, kneeling in the dirt, his hands shackled behind his back. Our eyes met across the distance. He did not speak, did not need to. He was sold the next morning. I watched the wagon leave before dawn. The mistress returned from Charleston a week later. She entered her study and remained there for 2 hours. When she emerged, her face showed nothing. The ledger went back into the locked desk. The household resumed its normal patterns, but something had changed. The mistress stopped summoning men after dark. The pattern broke, not out of remorse. Out of caution, Isaac had not succeeded in exposing her, but he had shown her that the system could be threatened, that evidence could be taken, that silence could be broken. She became more careful, more selective. The worn paths began to fade as grass grew back. But I knew the ledger still existed, still contained 11 names. Now 12, with Isaac added to the list. Disposal method, emergency sale. Conspiracy risk, Alabama cotton broker, April 1844. I speak now in 1847, 3 years. After I first saw that ledger, I speak knowing it may cost me everything. I speak because Isaac tried to speak and was silenced. I speak because 11 men were used and erased before him. I speak Because the mistress still lives in that house with a husband who never asks questions, still pours tea for neighbor women who never wonder, still attends church in her blue dress with white lace. I speak because the system that protected her still protects 1,000 others like her across this country. I was summoned to that house on a Tuesday in April when I was 23 years old. I walked a path that other men had worn before me. I entered a room where other men had stood in the same silence. I learned that chosen meant trapped, that secrecy meant isolation, that protection meant control. I learned that we were never people to her. We were entries in a ledger, problems to be managed, evidence to be destroyed when convenient. The ledger named 12 men. There were probably others before my time. There will probably be others after. When enough years have passed and she feels safe again. I carry their names in testimony now because their names were stolen from the record. Daniel, sold to Mississippi. Samuel, whipped and silenced. Benjamin, erased entirely. Marcus, broken and returned to fields. Joseph, sold to Georgia. Peter, exiled to distant work. For others, whose names I learned only from the ledger, whose faces I never saw, and Isaac, who tried to make the truth visible and was punished with the worst sale a man could receive. I stand here knowing this testimony will not be believed by those who need to believe it, knowing that a ledger hidden in a locked study is worth more than 12 men's lives, knowing that the woman who documented our destruction like livestock, records will face no consequence because the law was written to protect her and punish us. But I speak it anyway. I speak it because silence finished its work long ago, and the only resistance left is remembering. I speak it because someday, somewhere, someone might listen. The worn paths have faded now. The grass has grown back. The house looks peaceful in the evening light, but 12 men walked those paths. 12 men were summoned after dark. 12 men learned that secrecy was not protection. It was erasure. I testify to this truth. When the system that enslaves you gives a woman the power to desire you, she also has the power to destroy you, and she will use it, not in anger, not in passion, with the same cold planning she uses to manage her household accounts. I was entry number 8 in that ledger. Isaac was entry number 12. Our names were written in her careful hand, right next to notes about our disposal. That ledger still exists. That woman still lives. That system still protects her. This is my testimony. These are the names. This is what happened when secrecy protected only one side.